Hi, I'm your host, Pratik Panda, and you're listening to Impulse, the influencer marketing podcast by Phyllo. Here, we talk to the best and brightest in influencer marketing to help answer all your questions from finding the right influencers to making sure you have the best influencer marketing strategy. So let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Impulse, the influencer marketing podcast. Joining us today is Michelle Silverblatt, an accomplished influencer marketing expert with over a decade of experience in the marketing industry. She's currently the global director of social media and influencer marketing at Vagaro, a cloud-based business management solution specifically designed for salons, spas, fitness studios, and more. Thank you so much for joining us, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, great. So, right off the bat, one of the things that I like to ask all of my guests, especially if you are working in influencer marketing, what is one controversial hot take about about influencer marketing that you believe in, but maybe not everybody else agrees?
Yeah, I believe that every single brand should do influencer marketing. I think that it's definitely the way consumers are, and people in general are consuming content. I believe it's a must do, but it has to be done in the right way, right? So I know we're going to talk about authenticity and non-authenticity and what that really means. But there's kind of two ways I see it. There's authentic brand partnerships, right, which are in my opinion, the way to go. And then scripted paid ads and endorsements, which is another way to go that, of course, some brands are doing. But, to me, that's not the way to go. So, that's just a quick nugget on how I think about that.
Awesome, cool. So we will dive a little bit deeper on the right way to do influencer marketing. But before we get there, can you tell us a little bit more about Vagaro and your role over there?
Yeah, so Vagaro is a one-stop shop software to really help small businesses run smoothly. We really, take the kind of the grunt work out for the business owner so that they can focus on what they really love to do, and that means servicing their clients. We mainly serve beauty, fitness, wellness industries, but we are expanding into many other industries such as martial arts, therapy, and tattoo. So we're really growing rapidly. And a lot of the features that we offer are online booking for our clients. We have merchant services where businesses can take payments right through our software. We offer reporting. So business owners can stay on track with how they're doing as a business. Forms, if they have clients and customers who are getting a service, they can collect data before they come in, and so it kind of makes it really easy, and it's kind of that one-stop shop area where they can collect all of that. And we also offer marketing tools as well as like customer design for our businesses as well. So we have a lot of features, and we are actually adding more as we speak.
That's great. And the thing is, it's an interesting thing, right? I mean, the kind of people that you are working with or you're building this software for, in some sense, they are also all creators, right? They may or may not be super active on social media today, but I'm pretty sure that a large share of how they find their new customers are through social channels, right? Is that something that you also help them with?
Their social channels? Yes, correct. So we actually offer like a book now button on their directly integrated onto their Instagram and Facebook. So that's just kind of like a feature that we offer. However, we also offer a lot of marketing tools and tutorials and webinars, and even on our social media advice on how to run their social media accounts so that they can be better business owners and get more clients. So really kind of we walk hand in hand with our customers as they start their business and as they grow their business. And I believe that's really what sets us apart from our competitors, because we don't just drop them once they sign up. We really make sure they're nurtured throughout. But yes, a lot of, to answer your question before, a lot of them are creatives, right? They're in the hair industry, they're in makeup, they're in beauty, they're in wellness, they're in fitness. And so they're always evolving their content as well. So we try to be kind of there every step of the way to help them grow.
Awesome, that's great. So, a little bit about your background, right? You came from a career in TV production and moved into marketing and specifically influencer marketing. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I started off my career in TV production where I, was booking guests for shows like Tyra Banks and Rachel Ray and Anderson Cooper, and really kind of part of the creative process through and through from start to finish. So booking the guests, briefing them before they went on, and then kind of debriefing them with them after they went on a segment on the show. And one of the things I really loved about my production days was when our brands were incorporated into one of our segments and how to really kind of storytell around that integration. So that's really kind of what led me to the marketing industry, where I worked on a content team at Starcom Media Vest. And that is a global agency where I worked on a content team and helped really bring brands to life through content, whether that be, through social media or developing mini docuseries for the brand, developing creative ideas. So that's really kind of how I made the transfer from TV to marketing. And then one thing that led me to influencer marketing specifically was really, from the inception of my TV days, I really loved, kind of that integration of products organically, right? That's the key word, organically. Because obviously we're not going to advertise a product in the middle of a talk show, right? It's about incorporating a story around that. So that's really what I do today, is I run influencer marketing here at Vagaro, and really help our influencers tell the story around Vagaro and how it helps their business and how it helps them grow in a really authentic way. Obviously, to drive leads and signups, but also to drive awareness and engagement for the brand.
Got it. And you mentioned a keyword there called organic, right? And that brings us to the whole topic of authenticity. Influencer marketing cannot be done successfully without touching upon the topic of authenticity. So what does authenticity mean for you, at least when we look at it from the lens of an influencer as well as the lens of a brand?
Yeah. So authenticity means, really working with an influencer who wants to maintain the trust of their followers by building their following and nurturing their relationship with their community. Not necessarily just, oh, I want to get followers and I want to become this celebrity influencer, but it's more about, them being themselves through and through, and really building their community so that they're really engaged, really an engaged audience. And so I believe, the most successful influencer partnerships are the ones where the influencer actually really believes in the product that they're promoting, because the influencers know their audience best, right? So the content has to be authentic to that influencer, or it won't be authentic to their following, and the audience will see right through that. So that's what I think authenticity means, is really just someone who truly cares about their followers and they're not just a number.
Got it. And how do you make sure that you find an influencer that is authentic, right? You mentioned one thing around how they try to engage and grow their own audience, right? Is it just about growing followers, or are they really concerned about and care about their followers and therefore create content that helps their followers? So that's obviously one trait to watch out for. But otherwise, as a brand, what else can you do to make sure that you identify certain influencers that are authentic?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, influencers that actually use their product without you even reaching out, right? So seek out those influencers that are already using your product and that love your product. We're actually doing that right now at Vagaro, where we've contracted our super users, what we call them, of our product, and they do have a healthy following. They have 10K to 30K followers, which to us is a really great sweet spot, because that means they have a really engaged audience. So I would say, that is really important. So either, influencers that already use your product, or influencers who have a strong need to switch over, and kind of, go through that research process, create relationships in the community. A lot of our current influencers that are more well established and more celebrity status, I would say, have also an entire community of people that they know who use our product. So we've kind of branched out that way, right? So we started with one and now we have three, for example, that they're all connected, and that's authentic. That's an authentic relationship and authentic people that really want to use our product. So it just depends on kind of where you're at and, with your relationships.
Got it. More recently, in the last few episodes, I've been talking to some of our guests, and we've been trying to identify strategically for a brand what makes more sense. Like, let's say you want to do, you have some budget and you're going to try out influencer marketing for one of your products. And by default, a lot of times you are, as a marketer, you want to get as much reach as possible. And you're trying to identify the maximum number of influencers you can work with. But is that the best way to go about things? Or do you handpick a few and try to work with them more closely so that this authentic relationship can be developed?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting topic because I'm actually going through this right now, where we're working with in the UK an influencer that has a ton of followers and a huge audience and a huge following and more of that celebrity, but she doesn't use our product. So we found it a little bit challenging to get her to post about the product really authentically, right? Where in the US right now, we're working with some really engaged influencers. I would say right now we're working with 14 total influencers, from the US and the UK. But in the US, we have about 10 influencers we're working with. And I would say 5 of them are super engaged and super into our product and really kind of authentically promoting it. Right. And the other 5 have gotten on board onto the product and it's been a little slow. So I would say, to answer your question, I would say focus on fewer, bigger, better. Is my strategy and is going to be my strategy going into 2024, because those are the relationships that you want to foster. And you also want to ensure that you have a long-term relationship with these influencers so that they can partner with you year after year. Because that'll just help you grow, your business grow, they're growing, and then it just grows from there. So really focus on fewer, bigger, better.
Got it. Another thing that you mentioned in a previous response was around, the objectives for influencer marketing, right? As a brand, the obvious thing is you want to build more visibility, you want to get more attention, but we are also starting to move closer towards, conversions, driving ROI.
Yep.
How's that conversation going around, and, what's your opinion on it?
Yeah, so I think influencer marketing really is full funnel, right? So it has awareness, engagement, and then also conversions. But there's different types of content within the different buckets of these goals. So when we're talking about conversions, when I started here at Vagaro about 6 months ago, they didn't have any influencer marketing infrastructure set up. So I kind of had to build that. So currently, how we're doing it is we have every influencer marketer, every influencer has a sales page that they have, and they drive traffic to that sales page. So, they do a post, they drive traffic, we attach a UTM parameter to that link. And that way on our end, we can track how much traffic they're driving to the site from each post. We can track how many people are signing up through their link. So that's really kind of how we're tracking the conversion piece of it. However, we're in year 1 of influencer marketing at Vagaro. So my goal really is to focus on awareness engagement this first year. And yes, we are getting signups, but really focus in those 2 buckets. And then next year, I believe that the conversions will really follow and pick up, but we have to get our name out there in order for the conversions to happen.
Got it. And you mentioned something about an influencer marketing infrastructure, right? When you got started at Vagaro, it wasn't existing. You had to set it up. What does that infrastructure look like? So if somebody wants to start influencer marketing today, where do they start?
Okay, yeah. So when I joined the company, no one knew much about influencer marketing. So I was kind of coming in, helping teach and guide everyone. So I would say, ensure that you have a great a legal representative to help you with the influencer contracts, because that's like step 1 and that's super important. But I would also say have a system. If you're doing influencer marketing in-house, have a system for, the posting schedules of the influencers, how they deliver their content for review. What is the UTM parameters going to look like? If you develop kind of that ecosystem of how you're going to be communicating with the influencer, that's half the battle, right? And then even before that, I would say develop a relationship with the influencer. That's super important. You want to develop a relationship with the influencer outside of what they're posting. Because what I've learned is, some of our top influencers I have the best relationships with, and the influencers that are driving the most conversions and the most relationship building and the most engagement, those are the ones where I've really taken time to get to know and learn about, and also hear them out, right? So they have suggestions on how we could do things better for our software software and what they need. So yeah, it's definitely a long road when you build it from scratch, and especially if you're not working with an agency and you're doing it all in house. I would say, take some time to really get set up before you contract these influencers, or else you'll really be kind of building the plane while you're flying it, which is a little bit of what we're doing here at Vagaro this year. But we're learning a ton for next year, so that's really what matters.
Got it. And do you think that having an agency is important or essential at some point, or do you think it is something that can be scaled up in house as well?
I came from an influencer marketing agency. And when I walked into this role, I wanted to work with one because I thought it would be easier and I thought it would spearhead, or not spearhead, but it would really help streamline communications and take a lot of work off of our team. But what I'm learning is if you are not in contact with the influencer as a brand, you are at a disservice. So if an agency is kind of sitting between you and the influencer, that's a big disservice, and you don't get to build that relationship. You don't get to kind of talk to them directly. You don't get to give them feedback. It's kind of there's a middleman. So I would say if you can build a team internally at your brand, an influencer marketing team, I would recommend that more than going to an agency, so that you can speak directly with them and have that contact and build that relationship, because then it'll just be a stronger partnership.
Awesome. That makes sense. And, more on those lines as well. Something about, not agency can be the middle person, and that affects the relationship that you as a brand have with with the influencer, right? And we keep expecting as brand marketers or as influencer marketers, one obvious expectation is that you're hiring an influencer to help make more noise about your brand and talk about your brand. One interesting conversation I was having more recently is brands should also start, engaging better with the influencers that they work with or they want to work with. Brands today also have social handles that are active. They have a personality of their own. They can get really creative and quirky. And it's important that they also try to interact with, what influencers are posting as well, right? Do you think that's a good approach?
Yes, that's actually how we've gotten a lot of our super user influencers, I call them, or super user brand partners to come work with us, is because they follow us. We see that they comment on our stuff. We comment on their stuff. It's a dialogue in social media. So I believe, a relationship is a two-way street, so I think it has to kind of come from both ends. And the stronger you start out, I think the stronger you'll end up, should you decide to work with that person. But I think that brands should also let influencers do what they do best, and that's create, and not try to step in and try to change anything about, the content that they post.
Yeah, that's an important thing and very tricky for marketers to not try and get too involved, right? So, for influencer marketing managers, what is some advice that you would give, at least on the content strategizing part, right? At what point should they stop, getting too involved in the creative process with the influencer?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you give a creator the brief, you give a creator, what the points that you want to hit with your product, or, whatever you're trying to market, and then you let them do their thing. And you come back, obviously, like if it's totally off brand, and there's nothing, it doesn't make sense, then that needs to be changed. But I think letting them kind of be creative and organically integrate the content the way they see is best. If they use your product, that will be so much easier than if they don't use your product. So letting them run with their creative idea. And then also today, I mean, I just had a call yesterday with an influencer who missed the mark on a piece of content. And we hopped on the phone and we brainstormed together and we figured out a way that would work for Vagaro and also his brand and his following. He has a huge following on TikTok, and now we're good to go. And now he's going to create that piece of content. So it's really that collaboration piece, I think, is so key. But you have to give up some of that creative control, or else you're going to lose audiences.
Got it. And talking about, specific campaigns, is there some campaign that you did recently at Vagaro that you can talk about? And what was your process? How did you go about identifying the right influencers and then, getting them on board to running the campaign to measuring success? Can you walk us through one of the campaigns?
Yeah, so we have basically a year campaign going on right now with our 14 influencers. So it's not really, it's kind of an ongoing campaign where every single month they're posting about, like if it's a seasonality type theme. So this month we have influencers posting about business inclusivity to celebrate Pride. So we are letting the influencers post about how they make an inclusive, or they create an inclusive space for their clients and what that means to them. What does business inclusivity mean to them? So we've briefed them. We've talked to all of them. Okay, this is what we want to hit. Inclusivity and DE&I and all of that is very important to Vagaro. So we want to see how they incorporate that into their brand and with their customers. And all of them have created amazing content. We also got quotes that we've put out on social media, and we have on their sales pages, to really kind of drive home this theme. So we just, it's really about collaboration and just making sure that they're being authentic to the content that they want to put out there.
Since this topic about diversity and inclusiveness came up, a lot of brands try to do this well, but sometimes they're trying too hard, or sometimes they don't come across as authentic themselves as they're trying to implement this kind of a strategy, right? And I feel like this whole thing around, inclusivity and, taking care of all the audience sets is very essential, especially in the influencer marketing context, right? This whole thing around multicultural influencer marketing, and how do you as a brand try to implement this if it's not something that you're typically used to and you're sort of figuring it out?
Yeah, so we are figuring it out. We are working with some of our influencers now because we do have a diverse set of brand partners that we're working with. So we're tapping into them to get their thoughts on how we can bring this to life. The first thing is, I think, just because it's Pride Month doesn't mean you can post once about Pride Month and then stop talking about it the rest of the year. So I think it should be kind of infused in your marketing campaigns all throughout the year. So I think that's super important to get out there. And then I think a lot of what we do is highlight some of our customers on Vagaro who are diverse. We tell their story. We talk about how that they got their start in the business. What brought them here to Vagaro, and we tell those customer visit stories through various series on our social channels. So really giving them a spotlight to share their stories and how they grew their business, I think really goes a long way and sparks that conversation. And it also speaks to those audiences too. So we have support teams that we're trying to expand into, to cover all different ethnicities and backgrounds and all of that, so that we can speak to our customers in that way. And I think that also has to show through in our marketing, which we are working on. We're definitely not perfect, and we have a long way to go, but we've really started to have that conversation and really infuse it into our campaign.
All right, great, Michelle. I think tell me a little bit more about, in this aspect, right? As you are trying to learn from, you said that you are also trying to learn on the fly here and, get better at it. Have you come across brands that do this really well that you're taking some inspiration from?
Yeah, so one of the brands that I've really paid a lot of attention to, even in the past couple of years, is HelloFresh. I don't know if you're familiar with that
Yeah.
brand, but they are a brand that really authenticity is their bread and butter. They post content that really gains the attention of their audiences and that they may not be able to reach out on their own. And the creators and influencers they're working with tie their personal stories into the unboxing of the HelloFresh, like how they're creating content around it, how they're making food for their family. So I think they're doing it really well and not trying to be too sell anything super hard to the audience. So that's one brand that I really I think they've been doing it really well from the start. Another brand that I have also had my eye on is Glossier. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Do you know who that brand is?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Yeah. So they implement like a micro influencer strategy. So we didn't really get into this. I kind of touched on it before, but micro influencers, in my opinion, go a longer way than, these macro influencers with millions of followers, because they can be more engaged with their audience, which we talked about. But Glossier is doing this really well in that they're reposting, user generated content on their Instagram account that, with just in their eyes, everyone's an influencer, and they're kind of repurposing the content that people are posting about their products and making them feel a part of the conversation and a part of the brand, which I think is super important now. And that also goes a long way. And that's the stuff that sells. If you, if you can make someone feel important or, part of your brand and part of your story, that's going to go a long way. So I think their approach from the get-go has always been super real.
Yeah, you mentioned one thing that they think everybody is an influencer, right? And that is true. The concept of influence has always existed, right? We've always influenced, purchases for someone else. There's always been somebody in the family that you go to for a particular kind of thing that you want to buy. There is
Yeah.
a neighbor or a best friend or whatever, right? So we get influenced all the time. It's just that this keyword around influencer marketing is new, but all of us have been influenced in the past, and there are so many purchases that we've influenced as well. Like even with HelloFresh, right? I love HelloFresh, and there
Yeah.
was a time when I used to be excited about the HelloFresh box coming home, and one of the reasons
Mhm.
for me to try out HelloFresh was that A, I like cooking, but B, having grown up primarily in India and in an Indian household, I knew how to cook Indian food, but I really didn't know much about anything else, right? So when I used to subscribe for those boxes, I used to pick meals that I've never had before. And that's going to give me an experience of understanding new spices, new flavors, and some of the things that I have made for my friends have all been HelloFresh recipes. And they go
Oh,
crazy
wow.
because they've never had something like that, right? So when I'm visiting India and I'm cooking for one of my friends, and they are like, oh my God, we didn't know what couscous is, or what
Yeah.
sumac is, or so many spices that we don't know about, right? And the only way to learn and experience that is also through this. And I think the amazing fit is when you can create this sort of emotional connect where you don't have
Mhm.
to sell the brand anymore, right? Like
Yep.
I would be happy to talk about this consistently, and I've been doing that, right? It's just that I don't do it online, but I am going around telling my friends, or when I call them over and cook them a HelloFresh meal and so on, right? And I
Yep.
think that's where you want to get to. And I think one of the key things that you also mentioned is find people who actually love using your product. That's the best way you will
Mhm.
find that authentic fit.
Yes, I totally believe in that. And I think that's something we're going to implement next year. We brought a lot of people on that don't use the product, and we're kind of onboarding them to the products. And it's been a little bit of a challenge, because sometimes people find that the product isn't for them, because of a certain thing, or they're not super engaged with it. So I really believe, like, try to find influencers who already use your product, and then you can grow, and really have kind of like that ongoing partnership.
Okay, I want to understand a little bit more about how you got to the 14 influencers that you're now working with, right? How did you start with that? Was the list longer? How did you get down to the 14? What gave you
Yep.
confidence that here's the 14 I'm going to bet on for the rest of the year?
Okay, well, I kind of walked into a few of them because when I started the role, my manager said, okay, we already have relationships with these three, here you go, start to build that relationship and what that looks like. But then we knew, we had budget, and we knew we wanted to invest in influencer marketing. So we kind of sought out to figure out, okay, what are kind of three tiers of influencers that we want to go for? So, like, our top tier is really kind of like these more celebrity, status type people. I wouldn't say actually more celebrity. I would say kind of like a step down from that, in terms of like people who are in the industry, have a lot of influence, with their audiences, and can really kind of educate, their audiences. So that's the top tier. The middle tier is kind of, people who already use our product, but we may need to, we want to work with them to kind of upsell them and help them kind of like, teach them new things about the software and promote new features around Vagaro. And then that bottom tier is really kind of like these super users, right? So these super users who have a lower followings, but are really loving Vagaro and have used it for many years. So, a couple of them, like I said, kind of fell into our lap. And then we sought out to try to find, really through our Instagram, right, who is using our product. People have reached out to us and said, hey, I want to be, an influencer for Vagaro. And we jump on that opportunity. Of course, if they have like a healthy following and we think that their content would resonate with our audience and all of that. But that's where we kind of dive right in and say, okay, how can we build it together? So really, each influencer that we're working with has a different contract because we want to kind of cater to what's best for their audience and the platform that they are going to market on. So Instagram, we don't really have any LinkedIn, but Instagram, Facebook, and then we're also going to be launching on TikTok. So 14, like I didn't come in saying I wanted 14 influencers. It kind of just ended up that way this year, just based on our budget and based on kind of like this test that we're doing this first year and kind of seeing, okay, who's rising to the top? Who do we, who's driving the most conversions, who's driving the most engagement. And then at the end of the year, we'll take a look at that and assess for next year. And then that will be a fewer, bigger, better approach. So I would bet you that we will not have 14 influencers next year, but we'll have deeper level partnerships.
Got it. That makes sense. And tell me a little bit more about the market in general, right? I mean, I've heard from a lot of brands, or at least marketers at brands who are trying to move part of their budget from performance ads or performance marketing into influencer marketing. And I think we are all increasingly realizing that yes, you have to run some ads about your brand as the brand itself, but what works better is when some trusted influencers can talk about your brand, right? And you're trying to divert money there. What are some trends that you are seeing? What do you think will happen over the next couple of years or so?
With influencer marketing in general?
Correct.
Yes. I mean, I would say, kind of to answer your first point about the paid media ads versus influencer marketing, our approach this year is we're still running paid media ads, but we're leveraging our influencers to be in those paid media ads, right? So we held a media day and we actually shot content with them that are it's more like, okay, at Vagaro, like we can help you grow your business, increase sales, all of that. And we have kind of those more straightforward content that will run in paid media. So that's a tip that we tried this year that's actually really working because they're getting influencers in our organic social, but also our paid social. So that's one thing that has really been working for us. And then in terms of trends, I would say podcasts. A lot of these influencers have podcasts. So really where we're going to be focusing on this year, the rest of this year and next year is actually sponsoring influencer podcasts. Right now, we're currently sponsoring a fitness guru, Luca Hocevar. He has a podcast called Vigor Ground, and we're the exclusive sponsor of that. One of our other influencer brand partners is Paula Peralta, and we've helped her create a podcast from the ground up, and we are sponsoring that. So that was part of her kind of contract with us. So I really think like if you could get in front of these really engaged listeners, that could go a long way. However, that's kind of more for awareness because a lot of people are driving and listening to the podcast and they're not necessarily like signing up right then and there, but that's just one tactic. And then another thing we're looking into is affiliate programs. We're going to be building out a program next year for that and really kind of getting people on to help actually sell Vagaro and not just create content for us, but they will be incentivized for, driving conversions and signups. So that's another one we're looking into. And then YouTube Shorts is a big thing right now, and definitely like capitalizing off of TikTok. So we're going to be doing some YouTube short content with one of our influencers in the UK who has a really strong TikTok following, and we're going to see how well those do for us. So those are kind of some trends that I'm seeing right now.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that detail. But going from all this work talk to something a little bit more fun, if you had the opportunity to take an influencer out for lunch, dinner, a meal, right? Who would that person be and why?
Yeah. So I think if I were to pick two, well, one of them is kind of more like celebrity. Chrissy Teigen. I just think she's like super real and, she posts what she thinks. And I just think it would be really like an authentic conversation that we would have at this lunch. So that would be, plus I love John Legend. So that's definitely a plus. And then the second one is Lauren Bostic. She has a brand called Skinny Confidential, and she has a podcast called The Him and Her Show. And I'm just super engaged with their show, and I think they bring on amazing amazing guests and a lot of wellness content, which I'm really into right now. So, and I also think one thing about her is like she definitely doesn't promote brands that she doesn't believe in. Because I've definitely bought a lot of stuff from her, from her commercials, and I was like, she really believes in that. It must be good. So yeah, I think it would just be like a really fun conversation.
You
if
know
we went to
what,
lunch.
Michelle, thank you so much for sharing that. And one thing that is consistent whenever I ask this question to guests is the authenticity part, right? The favorite influencers that they have, like you also mentioned, like, she stays real. And that's what draws you to this influencer, right? And I think that's been consistent across the board, that the people that we connect the most are the people that can show their real side online. And that's hard to do, right? That is really hard.
Yeah.
And a ton of appreciation for everybody who's able to do that well online and just be themselves.
Yeah.
And that inspires and encourages so many others.
Yeah, for sure. I find myself like laughing at her all the time, like while I'm driving to work or like responding to like something that she says, like, oh my gosh, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I feel like I have a friend on the other side, so which is, like you said, that emotional connection and sparking that authenticity, I think is,
Yeah.
like you said, important. So thank you.
Yeah. One last question before we sign off for this episode. If somebody is just starting out in influencer marketing, what are some tips and advice?
Yeah, I would say, build relationships all across the board. That would be my first thing, and make sure you're really spending time doing that, and spending time getting to know who you want to work with before you actually sign on the dotted line. Because then, like I said, it'll go a long way in the long run. And then I also think, for brands on the branded side, like let go of that control to really try to like control everything that the creator is going to create, and let them be themselves. That's why they're here in the first place, and that's why they have a following. So really just, train yourself to think, hey, put yourself in the consumer's shoes. Like, would you want to listen to some, a really salesy ad? I think, people know when they're being sold to. So to me, that's really important when you're reviewing content. You want to make sure it's something that you want. So let go of creative control and build relationships. And then also just keep up to date on social media trends, which is kind of a given when you're in this field. But just making sure you're putting your dollars, where people are.
Yeah, sometimes you miss the obvious, right? Like you do everything right. It's just that you haven't stayed up with the latest trends and you pick the wrong format or the wrong platform, or, so yeah, it seems like an obvious one, but sometimes you miss the obvious.
Yeah, for sure. We could get caught up in just trying to get the work done, but you got to really think it through.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much for spending time with us today. This episode has a lot of inspirational nuggets as well as a lot of actionable insights that people can drive right out of. Thank you so much for spending time. I would love to have you again on the show after you've run your series of experiments, and I'm sure you have a lot more learnings to share.
Definitely. I'd love to come back. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Michelle.
Impulse, the Influencer Marketing Podcast, is brought to you by Phyllo. Phyllo is the easiest way to get access to authenticated creator data from hundreds of different platforms. To know more about Phyllo, visit getphyllo.com. That's getphyllo.com. Also, make sure to search for Influencer Marketing Podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcast listening platforms. And don't forget to click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Phyllo, thank you so much for listening.